A rich man with everything finds a little girl at his door, saying he ruined her mom's life, and learns she's his daughter. He never knew about leading to dark secrets, danger, and a fight to save his family. You won't believe how this story ends. So keep watching, dear friend. What you're about to experience is not just a story, it's a deeply human journey about lost resilience and the quiet, unexpected ways love finds us when we need it most. If this is your first time here, I invite you to drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your voice. And if you're someone who believes in second chances and the hidden strength of ordinary people, and in stories that stay with you long after they end, consider subscribing and tapping the bell icon. We share moments that matter. Thank you for being part of this one. Now, let's begin. It was supposed to be just another rainy Monday in downtown Seattle, the kind of morning where gray clouds blanket the sky and the city's glass towers vanish into the mist. Inside, the sleek high-rise headquarters of Callaway Robotics billionaire inventor Ethan Calloway was buried in design schematics and quarterly reports. He was a man who'd built an empire automating surgery bots and AI diagnostics, a man who believed he had total control over every variable in his life. But as the clock struck 8:03 a.m., a soft knock on his glass office door shattered that illusion forever. Outside stood a little girl, her hair damp from the rain, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her eyes, green, sharp and tense, pierced through the tinted glass and seemed to stare directly into Ethan's soul. His assistant, Megan Ruiz, rushed over, whispering frantically that the child had slipped past security, that she kept asking for Mr. Calloway. Before Ethan could react, the girl's trembling voice carried across the cavernous lobby. "Daddy, you destroyed Mommy's dreams." The words seemed to echo off the marble walls, louder than any boardroom confrontation Ethan had ever faced. The moment was surreal, unreal, yet there she was, small and fragile, yet fierce in the way only a child can be. Ethan felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, only stare at the child who looked heartbreakingly familiar. Her eyes mirrored his own, an unmistakable sign of blood. Security tried to intervene, but Megan hesitated. Even she saw it, the uncanny resemblance, the storm of recognition sweeping across Ethan's face. Sophie Bennett. The name burst into Ethan's mind like lightning. Claire Bennett's daughter. Claire, his past, his mistake, his regret. Claire had been the brilliant biomedical engineer who once challenged him in late-night research debates, who had the audacity to fall in love with him, and who disappeared from his life without explanation 6 years ago. Ethan remembered the moment he first saw her laugh, the way her eyes danced with determination. But he had buried those memories, convinced himself they didn't matter, that they were just a fleeting office romance unworthy of his future. Now, standing before him, was proof of his folly, his daughter. His daughter, who had apparently traveled through the rain alone to confront a father she'd never met. His daughter, who spoke of her mother's ruined dreams. His daughter, who made his perfectly constructed life crumble with a single sentence. Sophie looked up at Ethan with a quiet defiance that belied her tiny frame. "Mommy cries every night," she said, voice trembling, but eyes unwavering. She said, "You were too busy making robots to care about people." The words stabbed Ethan deeper than any business rival ever could. He tried to kneel down, tried to meet her at eye level, but the floor seemed to shift beneath him. In that moment, he realized his billions, his awards, his reputation. None of it meant anything compared to the pain he saw in his daughter's eyes. He reached out, but Sophie stepped back, clutching her rabbit tighter. This wasn't how reunions happened in movies. There were no warm embraces, no swelling music. There was only the raw truth: he had failed a child he didn't know existed. As he struggled to regain his composure, memories flooded back, nights spent with Claire, In the lab shared dreams of revolutionizing healthcare, whispered promises he never kept. And now, those broken promises stood before him in the form of a little girl shivering from the Seattle rain. Sophie's eyes glistened with tears that refused to fall, her small voice cracking as she asked, "Why did you hurt Mommy?" The question felt like a dagger twisted in his chest. Ethan realized that no corporate negotiation, no cutting-edge invention, no amount of money could undo the hurt he'd caused. His empire had been built on brilliance and ambition, but it had left no room for humanity. It's estimated that over 13 million adults in America have lost contact with a child. Ethan Calloway was now among them. But unlike many who walked away knowingly, his sin was one of ignorance and of arrogance. And the lesson was clear: the greatest achievements mean nothing if they leave behind broken hearts. Ethan tried to answer her question, but the words wouldn't come. He wanted to explain that he didn't know, that he never meant to hurt anyone, that he thought he was protecting himself and his company. But what could a billionaire say to a child who had traveled alone through the city just to confront him? Megan's voice broke the silence, gentle but urgent. "Mr. Calloway, what should I do?" Ethan looked at her then, at Sophie, then at the reflection of his own eyes in his daughter's gaze. For the first time in years, he felt completely lost. The lesson here is harsh but necessary. Never assume that your past will stay buried, and never forget that people, especially those who love you, are not obstacles to your success, but the very reason for it. Ethan knew in that instant that nothing else could matter until he made things right. He took a deep, shaky breath and extended his hand to his daughter. "Sophie, let me make this right." She looked uncertain, but didn't move. Megan exchanged a worried glance with Ethan, silently pleading for a miracle to break the tension. And as the rain outside turned to a downpour, washing the city clean, Ethan realized the storm in his own life had only just begun. The past had come knocking in the most innocent form imaginable, and nothing would ever be the same again. But what exactly had happened to Claire Bennett? And what secrets lay buried beneath the polished marble floors of Calloway Robotics? The answers would take Ethan and everyone around him on a journey far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. Even after Sophie had drifted off on the couch in his office, clutching her stuffed rabbit, and Megan had quietly covered her with a blanket, his mind refused to quiet. He found himself pacing the dark halls of Calloway Robotics, haunted by Sophie's words. In the sterile light of his private workspace, he finally opened Claire's old personnel file, something he hadn't thought of in years. The cold language of corporate paperwork stared back at him: termination due to unauthorized project activity. But as he read deeper, he noticed Claire's performance reviews. Exceptional, innovative, critical to R&D breakthroughs. The words didn't match the termination claim. His hand shook as he dug through archived emails, records he hadn't looked at since Claire's sudden departure 6 years ago. He found a message chain where Claire pleaded with his former CFO, Samuel Drake, for more time on a project she believed could revolutionize post-surgical healing. Samuel's response was curt: "Cease your unauthorized research or face immediate dismissal." Ethan realized with horror that Samuel had unilaterally fired Claire without his knowledge. The betrayal cut deeper than he expected. He had trusted Samuel like a brother. They had started the company together out of a rented garage. Now, it seemed Samuel had stolen more than just research. He had stolen years Ethan could have spent with his daughter. His mind flashed back to the nights he and Claire spent side by side in the lab, debating ideas until sunrise. The memory of her eyes lighting up with excitement, the way she challenged him to think bigger, made the truth all the more painful. How could he have let this happen? How could he have missed the signs that something was wrong? To confirm his suspicions, Ethan contacted a former colleague of Claire's, Dr. Luis Moreno, now working at a hospital in San Francisco. Over a video call, Luis explained how Claire's project, a regenerative tissue scaffold, had the potential to cut hospital recovery times in half. Luis paused, voice heavy with regret. Claire's data was groundbreaking. After she was fired, the work disappeared. She was devastated, Ethan. I thought you had thrown her away. Ethan closed his eyes, fighting back tears. His chest ached with the realization that his ignorance had cost Claire everything she'd worked for, and it had cost Sophie a father. He recalled a recent Harvard study showing that over 40% of high-performing employees quit not for better pay, but because they felt unsupported or undermined by leadership. It struck him how true that was in Claire's case. She hadn't just lost a job, she'd lost faith in the man she once trusted. Determined to make things right, Ethan reached out to his security chief and requested access logs from the day Claire was terminated. The logs revealed Samuel had blocked Claire's badge entry before she could retrieve her belongings. The final betrayal came when Ethan discovered Claire's laptop, assigned by Calloway Robotics, was wiped clean of her research just an hour after she was fired. Megan entered quietly, startled to find him hunched over his desk, face pale. "Mr. Calloway." "Ethan, you look like you've seen a ghost." He looked up, voice ragged. "I let this happen, Megan. Samuel destroyed Claire's life behind my back." Megan placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "But you didn't know." "That's not an excuse," he whispered. "I should have known. I should have protected her." He felt like a man who'd spent years building walls to keep himself safe, only to discover he'd trapped himself inside alone. Megan handed him a warm cup of tea, ice kind. "Then start now. Make it right." Ethan watched the city lights flicker beyond his office windows. He saw reflections of himself, of a man who thought he could plan for everything only to realize he was blind to what truly mattered. He remembered reading that the average American spends 90,000 hours at work in their lifetime. He'd spent nearly every one of those hours obsessed with progress, oblivious to the collateral damage his ambition left behind. As dawn began to break, coloring the skyline with hints of gold, Ethan knew he couldn't face Claire until he had more answers. He called in his legal team and ordered a deep audit of Samuel's financial records. If Samuel had orchestrated Claire's firing, what else might he have hidden Ethan didn't know yet, but he sensed the rot ran deeper than a single betrayal. He also realized he couldn't do it alone. The thought terrified him. He had always believed showing vulnerability was weakness. Yet, as he watched Sophie sleeping peacefully, he understood the real weakness was pushing people away when you needed them most. He resolved to find Claire, to give her the chance to speak her truth and to hear it without interrupting, without justifying himself. He owed her that. More importantly, he owed Sophie a father who would fight for their family, not hide behind corporate strategy. And deep down he feared the worst, that the secrets Samuel buried 6 years ago weren't just about Claire's project, but part of something larger and far more dangerous. Something that could destroy everything Ethan had built, and everything he hoped to rebuild with Claire and Sophie. He took one last look at the sleeping child who had turned his world upside down. Ethan knew it was time to stop being the man he had been and start becoming the father he should have been all along. Ethan stood by the window of his office, eyes unfocused as the early morning light spilled across Seattle's skyline. The city was waking up, but his world felt like it was closing in. His audit team had worked through the night piecing together fragments of Samuel Drake's activities. What they discovered made Ethan's blood run cold. Samuel had been funneling company funds into shell corporations for years, using complicated networks of offshore accounts. He hadn't just sabotaged Claire's project, He'd used it as a smokescreen to hide a sprawling conspiracy. Ethan found himself gripping the windowsill so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had trusted Samuel with everything. They had started Calloway Robotics together with nothing but a vision and a loan Ethan secured by mortgaging his childhood home. Samuel had been there through every late night, every near failure, every small victory. Or so Ethan thought. The betrayal felt like a dagger twisting in his chest. He called Megan into the office and laid out the documents. Megan's eyes widened as she scanned them, her hands trembling. "How could he do this?" she whispered. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice low. "Because I wasn't looking. I was so focused on chasing perfection that I let my best friend rob me blind." He remembered reading a study from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Nearly 85% of major corporate fraud cases are committed by people in positions of trust. The faces you least expect are the ones who can do the most damage. And in that moment, Ethan realized he was living proof. Determined not to lose another second, Ethan arranged to meet Claire in person. He called her at the small apartment she shared with Sophie in the city's Capitol Hill neighborhood. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice wary. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I know the truth about what happened," he said quietly. "And I know you've been carrying this alone for too long." There was a long pause and then a choked breath. "You have no idea what I've carried." They met at a quiet cafe near the University of Washington. Claire arrived wearing a simple gray coat, hair pulled back, eyes guarded. But as soon as she saw Ethan, her composure cracked. She slapped a folder down on the table. "These are copies of the research you thought you lost," she said, her voice shaking with anger and heartbreak. "I kept them. I couldn't let it all die." Ethan opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the data, the charts, the notes in Claire's familiar handwriting. It was everything proof she had been right. Proof that Samuel had lied. Proof that his own negligence had cost them both years they could never get back. Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she spoke. "Samuel told me you wanted me gone, Ethan. He told me you called me a distraction. That you said love was weakness." Ethan felt like the floor had been ripped out from under him. He reached across the table, but Claire recoiled. "I never said that," he whispered desperately. "I thought you left me." A tear slipped down Claire's cheek. "I stayed up every night for months waiting for you to call, to ask me why I left. But you never did." Their raw, exposed pain hung between them like a storm cloud. It was a moment that laid bare years of misunderstanding and silent suffering. Claire's voice broke. "I raised our daughter alone because I thought you didn't want her. I watched her look out the window every birthday, hoping a man she'd never met would come through the door." Ethan's breath hitched his eyes, burning with tears he couldn't stop. He wanted to gather her in his arms to apologize for every lost moment, but he knew words couldn't heal the wounds he'd caused. The barista called out a name, breaking the silence. The sound felt jarringly normal, a reminder that the world outside kept turning while theirs had come undone. Ethan pulled himself together, speaking quietly. "Samuel has been embezzling from the company. He didn't just hurt us, he's endangered everything I've built. Everything we once dreamed of building together." Claire looked up sharply, her grief replaced by fury. "You need to stop him." Ethan nodded. "I will, but I need your help." A brief flash of the woman he once knew, brilliant, determined, unafraid, passed across Claire's face. She opened her laptop and began explaining the data she saved, showing him where Samuel had hidden his tracks. As they worked side by side, the years of silence melted into a fragile alliance. Ethan learned that Samuel's plan went far beyond simple theft. He had been manipulating research outcomes, feeding misinformation to investors, and positioning himself to sell Calloway Robotics' intellectual property to a foreign competitor. The conspiracy was so deep that it risked not only Ethan's company but also the jobs of thousands of employees and the future of medical robotics innovation. Ethan realized with a sickening certainty that Samuel had always resented him. Perhaps it started as professional jealousy, but it had grown into something poisonous. And the worst part was that Ethan's blind faith had let it happen. In that quiet cafe, Ethan and Claire made a pact they would expose Samuel together. They would clear Claire's name, secure Sophie's future, and reclaim the company that was supposed to be their shared dream. As they finished reviewing the last of the documents, Claire looked up, eyes glistening. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she whispered. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Ethan said softly, "but I'll earn it. For you, for Sophie." For the first time in years, they looked at each other not as enemies or strangers, but as two people who had survived heartbreak and betrayal, and who still shared a fierce love for the little girl who'd brought them back together. The plan was simple. Ethan and Claire would meet with the board of directors the next morning, armed with the evidence they had gathered to confront Samuel and stop the sale of Calloway Robotics research. But just hours after they left the cafe, everything unraveled. At Ethan's Medina estate, the security alarm shrieked in the dead of night, waking him with a jolt. Sophie screamed from her room as the sound of shattering glass echoed through the halls. Ethan raced down the corridor, heart pounding like a war drum. He found Claire already with Sophie wrapping her in a blanket, eyes wide with terror. The security chief's voice crackled over the intercom, strained and ragged. "Mr. Calloway, we have multiple intruders. Armed. They breached the east perimeter." Ethan felt a cold fury wash over him. Samuel had discovered their plan and struck first. He grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her and Sophie toward the hidden staircase leading to his secure basement. Every footstep felt like it took an eternity as they descended into the shadows. The walls vibrated with muffled gunshots. Sophie whimpered softly, clinging to her mother. Ethan had spent years perfecting the technology to save lives, but now he was helpless to save his own family. They reached the reinforced safe room, a hidden bunker behind the wine cellar. Ethan punched in the code, the heavy steel door sliding shut with a hiss. Inside, dim lights flickered on illuminating computer screens, showing camera feeds of masked men moving methodically through the mansion. Claire's eyes filled with tears as she pulled Sophie close. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. Ethan knelt beside them, fighting back his own rising panic. "Listen to me," he said, voice trembling but determined. "We're going to get through this. I won't let them hurt you." His gaze shifted to Sophie, who looked up with wide, tear-streaked eyes. "Daddy, are those men here to take me away?" she asked, her voice small and shaking. The question nearly broke him. He pulled her into his arms. "No, sweetheart. No one is going to take you from us." On the monitors, Ethan watched his security team outnumbered and outgunned. He realized they couldn't just hide, they had to escape. He remembered an old service tunnel connecting the estate to a boathouse on Lake Washington, a relic from when the property belonged to a reclusive tech magnate decades earlier. It was their only chance. Ethan pulled up the blueprint on the monitor. He turned to Claire, explaining in a hushed voice how they could reach the tunnel through the maintenance corridor. Claire's face hardened with determination. She wiped her tears, then cupped Sophie's face. "We're going to play a game," she said gently. "It's called Silent Spies. We have to be quiet as mice, okay?" Sophie nodded bravely, though her hands still trembled. They moved quickly, Ethan leading the way, every shadow in the darkened hallways feeling alive. A noise ahead froze them in place, footsteps. Ethan motioned for Claire and Sophie to hide behind a stack of old crates. A man passed by, flashlight sweeping inches from their faces. Sophie's eyes welled with silent tears, but she didn't make a sound. It was a moment of terrifying clarity. Despite her age, she understood how real the danger was. Once the intruder disappeared, they continued to the tunnel entrance. The passage smelled of damp earth, the air heavy and cold. As they hurried through, Ethan couldn't help but think about the irony. He had built Calloway Robotics to help patients heal faster to save lives. Yet his own obsessive need for control had driven away the woman he loved and endangered the family he'd never dreamed he could have. Halfway through the tunnel, a loud crash came from behind. The steel door to the estate had been breached. Voices echoed in the distance, shouting orders. Ethan knew they were running out of time. He scooped Sophie into his arms and urged Claire to move faster. His mind raced. What if they were caught? What if Sophie's last memory was of him failing her? Emerging into the boathouse, the smell of water and gasoline filled their lungs. The moonlight glinted off the lake, and for a brief second it felt like hope. Ethan rushed them to a waiting boat, an old but reliable vessel he used for quiet mornings fishing. He started the engine, praying it wouldn't stall. The roar of the motor cut through the night, masking the gunfire that erupted behind them. As they sped across the lake, Claire held Sophie tightly in her lap. The wind whipped at their faces. The cold night air filled with the scent of rain. Sophie buried her face in her mother's chest, sobbing softly. Ethan stole glances over his shoulder at the estate growing smaller in the distance, flames licking the night sky as the mansion began to burn. His childhood home, the symbol of his success, was now a smoldering monument to his failures. He kept his eyes on the dark horizon, his heart breaking at the thought of the life they had lost, but resolved to build something new from its ashes. He remembered reading a Harvard Business Review article stating that 60% of family-owned businesses collapse within 3 generations because of greed, pride, and secrets. That was the legacy Ethan had been on track to leave. But he realized it wasn't too late to choose a different path. As they crossed the open water, Ethan made a silent vow he would never again let ambition blind him to what mattered most. He would fight not just for his company, but for the trust of the woman he loved and the future of the daughter he had nearly lost before he ever knew her. Ahead, lights from a small lakeside cabin twinkled. It belonged to Ethan's old mentor, a retired engineer who had always believed in second chances. They could take shelter there, regroup, and plan their next move. For now, they had escaped with their lives and the hope that together they could finally heal what had been broken. The cabin on the edge of Lake Washington was quiet, wrapped in the silver light of dawn. Inside, Ethan sat by the fireplace, its embers casting warm shadows across the room. Claire dozed lightly on the couch with Sophie curled beside her, their breaths slow and even. For the first time in days, the house was still, but Ethan's mind churned with everything that had brought them to this fragile moment of peace. He knew they couldn't hide forever. Samuel's reach was long, and the evidence they carried was the only way to protect their family and the company's future. He picked up Claire's folder, now worn from hours of desperate review. It was more than proof of wrongdoing. It was a testament to her brilliance, her perseverance in the face of betrayal, and her unwavering love for the daughter they shared. When Claire stirred awake, Ethan was ready. He showed her a plan. They would convene a private board meeting using the combined evidence of his audit and her research. They would expose Samuel before he could manipulate the narrative. Claire's eyes softened as she read through the documents, but her voice was still heavy with old wounds. "You have to understand," she said, eyes shimmering. "I never wanted you to fail, Ethan. I just wanted you to see me." He reached out, taking her hand. "I see you now, and I wish I had long before this." His voice broke with raw honesty. "I can't change what I did or didn't do, but I can make sure Sophie grows up knowing how fiercely she is loved by both her parents." They returned to Calloway Robotics just before noon. Ethan's team worked quickly to secure the building. The board assembled in a hush of confusion and tension, some members uneasy after learning of the fire at Ethan's estate. Samuel arrived late, his face an arrogant mask that faltered only when he saw Claire standing beside Ethan. Ethan began with a quiet intensity that commanded the room. He laid out the forensic trail of Samuel's theft and deceit, each slide projected on the conference screen, stripping away the lies that had propped up Samuel's power. Claire took the floor next, her voice steady as she shared how Samuel sabotaged her research and stole years of potential breakthroughs. As she spoke, Ethan watched her with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He realized how many times he'd underestimated her and how much stronger she was than he'd ever given her credit for. Some board members shifted uncomfortably, their loyalties wavering, as the scale of Samuel's crimes became undeniable. Samuel tried to laugh it off, to spin it as a conspiracy between ex-lovers, but the documents left no room for doubt. When Ethan presented a video confession from one of Samuel's accomplices recorded just hours before, the last of Samuel's supporters fell silent. Samuel's face turned ashen as security entered the boardroom. He sputtered desperate denials as they escorted him out, but Ethan didn't watch him go. His eyes were on Claire and Sophie, who had slipped in quietly at the end of the meeting holding hands. The sight of them gave him a sense of peace he'd never felt before, even on his greatest days of professional triumph. Afterward, Ethan faced the board, speaking with humility that surprised even himself. He admitted his past blindness, his failures not only as a leader, but as a man. He promised change, transparency, compassion, and a commitment to the people behind the machines. He told them that no technology, no matter how advanced, could replace trust, and that a company without integrity was doomed to collapse. Outside the building, news cameras waited. Ethan stepped into the bright afternoon light with Claire and Sophie, not as a CEO protecting a reputation, but as a father and partner ready to face the world honestly. Reporters shouted questions, flashes popped, but when Sophie asked in a small, hopeful voice, "Daddy, are we safe now?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, lifting her into his arms. "We're safe, and we're together." In the weeks that followed, the story of Samuel's betrayal and Ethan's redemption made headlines, but so did Claire's research. Investors renewed their confidence in Calloway Robotics, not just because of the groundbreaking technology, but because they saw a company willing to own its mistakes and rebuild on stronger, more honest foundations. Ethan sold the burned estate and used the proceeds to start a foundation dedicated to supporting women in STEM careers, naming it after Claire's mother, who'd inspired her to become an engineer. He and Claire moved with Sophie to a cozy house overlooking Lake Union, close to parks, good schools, and a community where they could heal. One evening, as Sophie fell asleep in Ethan's lap, Claire looked over from the kitchen table where she was sketching ideas for a new prototype. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing everything?" she asked softly. All the time Ethan admitted kissing Sophie's forehead. "But I think about this more the second chance we have, and how I'm never letting it slip through my fingers again." The real lesson Ethan learned wasn't about business or innovation. It was that love, when neglected, becomes a wound that festers. But when nurtured, it can become the strongest force for redemption. And with every sunrise over the lake, he was determined to show his family and himself that the future was still theirs to build together. From the gleaming towers of downtown Seattle to the dark, labyrinthine halls of his estate, Ethan Calloway's journey was one of ambition, heartbreak, and ultimately redemption. He began as a man obsessed with success, convinced that control and achievement could shield him from the messy unpredictability of life. But when Sophie, the daughter he never knew existed, appeared at his office doors and shattered his carefully constructed world. Ethan was forced to confront the reality he had long ignored, that no empire, no matter how powerful, could fill the emptiness left by broken relationships. As the truth unraveled, Ethan discovered that the betrayal of his closest confidant, Samuel Drake, had not only robbed his company, but destroyed the woman he once loved. Claire Bennett had been unjustly cast out, her brilliant work buried, and her faith in love shattered. Yet it was Sophie's innocence, her unwavering hope that her parents might come together, that reignited Ethan's will to change. Together, Ethan and Claire faced dangers that tested their courage, from armed intruders in the dead of night to boardroom battles with everything on the line. Each moment stripped away Ethan's illusions and forced him to reckon with the consequences of neglecting the people who mattered most. In the end, it wasn't just the exposure of Samuel's schemes that marked Ethan's transformation, but the way he chose to act afterward. He stood before his employees' investors and the world, owning his failures and pledging to lead with integrity and compassion. He didn't stop at saving his company. He dedicated himself to making it a place where talent was nurtured, not exploited. Ethan and Claire began rebuilding their relationship from the ashes of old hurts, giving Sophie the gift of a united family she had always longed for. By opening his heart to vulnerability, Ethan found a kind of success he had never dreamed possible, a life rooted in love, honesty, and purpose. The moral of Ethan's story is as powerful as it is timeless. True strength lies not in the walls we build to protect ourselves, but in the courage to break them down. Admit our mistakes and seek forgiveness. It is a reminder that love requires patience and humility, that relationships thrive not on perfection, but on understanding and resilience. In a world that often values winning over kindness, Ethan's journey shows the profound importance of choosing compassion, even when it means facing our deepest fears and regrets. For each of us today, the lesson is clear. Don't let pride or ambition blind you to the needs of those you love. Take time to truly see the people in your life, listen to their fears, and support their dreams. Remember that relationships require constant effort, and it's never too late to reach out, apologize, or make amends. In doing so, we not only heal old wounds, but create bonds stronger than any success could ever bring. If you found this story moving, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications so you never miss an inspiring tale like this one. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope, courage, and second chances to life. Thank you for watching, and we can't wait to share the next incredible journey with you.